We certainly are excited about having him with us today. Again, welcome to Beaufort, the Gullah community, but also to the Low Country and to the Tabernacle Baptist Church. And at this time, Queen Quet will officially welcome you to the nation.
But look at it, where we do things down, yo, we don't do them while we dry set. Okay? So let me see if I can get the people to help me out real quick for welcome on for truth, yeah? Y'all come on. Oh, freedom. We would say, we're so glad that Honor the day your Beto, and things like that. That more sound like a Gullah Geechee name when you say Beto, you know, and things like that, not the O'Rourke part. But we are very, very happy that you are here in the Gullah Geechee Nation. And I thought, based on our conversation about, you know, Harriet Tubman and about Robert Smalls, there would be no better way to pay tribute to this moment than to talk about freedom and to sing about freedom. Wow. You are in a place where the spirituals emerged from this soil. Okay, and that's officially our state music in South Carolina. So we want to have you to shout a little bit and get about that spiritual while you're going on the trail. But we definitely say thank you for coming for Yeti, who we be in the Gullah Geechee Nation. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Queen. Beto, again, it's nice to meet you. Thank you for joining us here in Beaufort. My name is Vanity Reed Dieterville, for those who don't know. I'm a native of Charleston, South Carolina, and a political science student at the College of Charleston, born and raised down there in Chucktown, and a self-proclaimed Geechee. So Beto has been a force within the Democratic Party since his days on City Council in El Paso, Texas. He's been a proponent of providing protections for all citizens, especially those within minoritized identities. He rallied for the access to health benefits to domestic partners, advocated for the legalization of marijuana, which would lead to decriminalization and expungement of records for nonviolent offenses, and has shown that he's willing to keep and speak for the communities sequestered into the margins of society. With an intent that aligns with his impact, he's illustrated the strong possibility of flipping staunch conservative states like Texas to blue on the political roadmap. Vouching for a more sustainable path to increased national security, he has vocally opposed border walls and recognizes the need for this nation to take a critical look at the impacts of our consumption and our activity on our planet. He proposes regulated emission standards to net zero by the year 2050 in order to curb the effects of climate change. Acknowledging that we thrive off of the land here from coastal communities is critical in understanding which geographic areas will suffer the adverse climate effects first. O'Rourke understands that access to abortion is one of the ways in which we can grant women the agency and autonomy over their bodies and ensure practical and fulfilling lives. He understands that the need for purposeful and comprehensive LGBT policy and has recently spoken out against the atrocities that members of the community face, like Black transgender women, and I have personally appreciated the visibility on the matter of his behalf. But I'll speak with brevity and allow you to do your work. After all, the Gullah Geechee Nation knows all too well the life of the margin society and what they look like. As you may know, the Gullah Geechee Nation exists from Jacksonville, North Carolina to Jacksonville, Florida, and it encapsulates sea islands as well as a range of 35 miles inland. I hail from Charleston, South Carolina, the holy city, as they call it, and will always be Geechee no matter where I go. We are the progeny of slaves and relics of their mighty resistance. We are preservers of rich language and robust culture, and we were always ready for progressive discourse. So I'd like to now formally introduce you to the Gullah Geechee Nation, presidential candidate Beto O'Rourke.
Wow. Thank you. Vanity, thank you for the introduction and the very kind words, and for making the effort and the drive to be here today so that I could listen to you. And very much looking forward to the conversation and your contributions to it. Reverend Hodges, thank you for hosting us today, and to the community of Tabernacle Baptist Church for your hospitality and your kindness to a stranger from far west Texas. Grateful for that. To Queen Quet, I cannot thank you enough for personally being here to greet us, to welcome us, to instruct us in the history and the traditions that inspire not just this community or this state, but this country and people beyond our shores. I was asking you, what is it about this community, Beaufort in particular, and the Gullah Geechee Nation and her citizens in general, that has produced some of the heroes that we are here to celebrate today? Women like Harriet Tubman, who you were telling me was perhaps one of the first, if not the first women in this country to lead people into battle, and for the best of all reasons, to free her fellow human beings from bondage. Or to produce someone like Robert Smalls, who took possession of a Confederate ship in order to bring more people to freedom and to ensure justice for this country, at risk to his own life, willing to sacrifice it for others. And you talked about a tradition of fierce independence that has existed here for centuries. And I've got to tell you, I see that in you. I feel that from the other members of this church community and the citizens of this nation. And I got to tell you, it really resonates, and it is powerful for a person from El Paso, Texas. As Vanity was just saying, this place that is, in my mind, having grown up there, a wonder of the world. We're in the Chihuahuan Desert at the foot of the Rocky Mountains, connected to two other states and another nation. Chihuahua, New Mexico, Texas, Mexico, and the United States all come together in this one place where the Rio Grande River joins us and does not separate us. And yet so few of our fellow Americans understand our story or appreciate our contributions. And I want to tell your story and the story of the Gullah Geechee Nation to the people that I had the pleasure of representing in El Paso, because it is powerful, it is profound, and it is absolutely inspiring. And I want to make sure to make the best use of the limited time that I have here by having the chance to listen to you. So know this, as Vanity said, our most urgent and pressing priority is to confront the challenge of climate change before it is too late. I know that your perspective on the front lines of this, whether it is sea level rise or the intensity or size or frequency of the storms that hit this region and in this state, and really are representative of what's happening in the world, what you can tell me is far more important than what I could describe to you in terms of our policy or our plans, because that is what will inform the urgency that others in this country feel. What you can tell me about the ability to afford housing and ensure that we're able to maintain the families and the culture and the nation that has persisted for hundreds of years here, to make sure that it will continue for hundreds of years going forward, to make sure that we stop any prospect of offshore drilling, which could spoil forever these very lands that are sacred to this and every generation that follows. I want to make sure that I have the chance to hear directly from you about these and other issues, and to include you and your stories and your ideas and your concerns and what you are most hopeful and optimistic for into this campaign and into the service that we would like to provide as president. So, Queen Quet, thank you again for your kindness and for your leadership. to each of you for making the time to join us today. Very much looking forward to hearing what you have to say, and we are grateful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Beto. As Beto indicated, he wants to hear from you. This is a unique community. Though we have many things in common with the rest of the country, there are some concerns that are unique to us. And at this time, he wants to hear from you. He wants to learn more about this area, some of our unique concerns. He wants to answer your questions as well. So we're going to acknowledge you at this particular time. The ground rules are that when you are acknowledged, that you will indicate who you are and then make your statement or raise your questions or concern. So at this time, we will acknowledge the first hand that we see.
Barbara Hodges, mine had
You.
I would like to just mention this based on what you just stated about climate change, and also you and I talked about the Queen Quet Datus in Houston, so I know Texas pretty well. Been to Del Rio, but I go to Brackettville a lot. And one of the things that concerned me was the tremendous drought in Brackettville, to the point where I was crossing bridges and looking for water, and there was no water there anymore. And I would often say, I wish I could be like Bewitched and twink my nose and bring people from the Gullah Geechee Nation to these places that we take for granted all the water we have. But now we went from a drought to a deluge of rain in the past 2 weeks. So food security is a major issue. Because when we have these massive rains that are happening, sea level rise is already here, then we have these rains, now it's nearing and part of harvest season, protecting that and weighing all of that in the balance I think is critical. So these things, of course, tied to cultural heritage and the sustainability of cultural heritage. So what is it that you're going to do? If you are the President of the United States, what is it that you're going to do that's going to help with these issues, in addition to what you already outlined about climate change and the prevention of offshore drilling, that will protect food security and cultural heritage and be able to have people remain where they are, place-based people like Gullah Geechees, because people always say, well, you can always retreat, you can move. I said, the only retreat we want is to relax at the spa. We're not leaving the coast. So what is it that you will put forth in that effort for food security and cultural heritage continuation?
Queen Quet, you described the problem of both too much and not enough.
Right.
In Houston, where we celebrate Queen Quet Day every single year, in 2017, we saw 58 inches of rain from a single storm, which is a landfall record for all of recorded history in North America, and also was the third 500-year flood in that one community. People had not yet finished rebuilding from the last flood before the next one hit, and in that same state, as you just described, you have farmers who seek to persist through historic droughts. And our ability to grow our own food, and in Texas, the cotton capital of the world, the ability to grow our own fiber to feed and to clothe us is severely compromised. And then you add to the challenges that we face here of sea level rise. So you ask, how do we meet this challenge, and how do we get to the goals that Vanity described of net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, getting us halfway there by 2030? First and foremost, to your excellent question, is we put those communities who are first in line to take the impact of climate change and pollution, first in line for federal support to harden them and make sure that they are ready to persist and survive the next man-made, human-made disaster of climate change. That's an investment in infrastructure. It's an investment in water. We know that throughout South Carolina, there are communities where it is not safe enough to drink the water today. Across this country, whether it is Flint, Michigan, or the Central Valley of California, that will require billions of dollars of investment. As president, I will make sure that we make that investment. Also in the infrastructure that protects communities from sea level rise, from flooding, ensures that we have the water resources for those who attempt to be able to grow this food and fiber through historic droughts. And then we fully embrace renewable energy and we relieve ourselves from a dependence on fossil fuels and ensure that those high-wage, high-skill, high-growth jobs in solar and wind are those jobs that define the American future and allow us to lead globally on this challenge. And then lastly, I want to make sure that we understand the opportunity that rural communities and farmers hold for making sure that we lead on this issue. Paying farmers for environmental services like planting cover crops that pull more carbon out of the air, precision and no-till farming to disturb less of the carbon in the soil, sustainable agricultural practices. That's not just good for the soil and our waters, it's good for this planet, and it allows us to meet our obligations to the next generation. In other words, if all of us do all that we can, don't meet this by half steps or half measures or only half the country, I'm confident that we'll be able to meet this challenge and make those descendants who follow us, and we were talking about this at the outset, make those descendants who follow us proud of what we've been able to do, just like we feel the pressure to be able to deliver on the inspiration that we feel from those who preceded us. So thank you for asking the question.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Hi, my name is Lady Pamela. I'm a executive from the University of Beaufort County. And I was wondering, how do you plan to motivate and address the younger voters here to listen to where you stand on the issues such as wage increase, health care, good education, criminal justice, and not only here, but for the country at large, which is not being done right now?
Lady Pamela, thank you for the question. Also, thank you for warmly greeting me when I walked in. Made me feel good. Thank you. I think you have to go to where young people are. For anyone who's ever run for office and has listened to any advice, folks tell you do not show up for young people because they don't turn out to vote. You're wasting your time. You have limited resources. Spend them with people who've traditionally voted in 5 out of last 5 elections. We turned that logic on its head and we thought, if no one ever showed up for me, I wouldn't vote either. So why don't we go to those places? Why don't we go to Voorhees, as we did in Denmark, South Carolina, or South Carolina State, or USC, the real USC, as people of South Carolina tell me. And both introduce ourselves, as we've done today, and as we are doing today, listen to people about what is most pressing in their lives. Hearing about the extraordinarily high cost of education and the student loan debt that follows, and the fact that historically black colleges and universities like Voorhees have an additional problem in that their endowments are smaller than other private universities, and so critically important that we make greater federal investment in those HBCUs, make sure that we reduce the cost of higher education, make it debt-free for middle and lower income families, and then if you're willing to dedicate some part of your life to public service, to teach in a classroom, to work at the VA, to help to restore coastal lands in this community, let's wipe clean your student loan debt so you can focus on that public service. These are some of the things that we're hearing from young people, and I know from our experience in Texas that it works because during our Senate run, we saw young voter turnout during early voting increase by 500% over the last midterm year. So showing up for people, listening to them, bringing them in to our democracy, not only gives them a seat at the table, it gives them a reason to stand up and to be counted. And in Texas they did, and we're gonna make sure that in South Carolina, if we have anything to do with it, they do as well. But that begins by showing up and listening. Thank you, Lady Pamela, appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for coming, and thank your staff.
Cynthia, will you give him the microphone?
My name is Thomas Barnwell Jr., and I'm a native of a little place called Hilton Head Island. Probably never heard of it.
Yeah.
But that's okay. My question is specifically into health care for all residents. I used to be healthcare administrator in my other life, one of the many things. And for this area, in 1969, we had problems of Ascarius lumbricoideus. And as a result of testimony of the late Ernest F. Hollings and many others, I was one of those many persons that testified in Washington February 14, 15, 16, 1969. Now, we do have a healthcare system called Beaufort, Jasper, Hampton Comprehensive Health Services. I'm concerned, what are your long-range, short-range plans, if and when you're elected, hope you get elected, to allow rural community healthcare systems to continue to serve the underserved population? Also, we know that there are fewer medical providers. Attached to that, what are your long-range plans for outpatient as well as telemedical service?
Yep.
Thank you very much. I apologize for my long question.
It was perfect, and I'm grateful for the question and the grounding and the context of this country's history. 1969, the same year that you were testifying, same year, of course, in Charleston at the Medical University of South Carolina, those brave hospital workers led that strike that brought in first hundreds and then thousands. I believe the first public appearance by Coretta Scott King after the murder, the assassination of her husband. And from that was the ability for those hospital workers to organize and to make sure that they were treated a little bit more better than they had been before. And yet, as we were there on that 50th anniversary, we learned, I was listening to Pastor Thomas Dixon, I said, well, 50 years later, it's got to be so much better. And he said, no, in some cases, Beto, it is worse. Many of the nurses working at MUSC right now cannot afford to receive health care in the same place that they provide it. So you ask, what's the solution to this? Guaranteed, high-quality, universal health care for every single American has to be the goal. You ask about the means. Let's make sure that if you're one of the tens of millions of our fellow Americans who has no care at all, that we enroll you into Medicare. If you are insufficiently, I love that you used the word guaranteed earlier. If you are insufficiently covered, means you have health insurance, but you're not guaranteed care because you may not have the money for the copay, you may not be able to afford the premium, you may not be able to bridge that deductible, you can elect to move into Medicare. But if you have employer-sponsored insurance that you like, works for you and your family, you're able to keep it. It's a plan called Medicare for America, and it's the one that we support. And then lastly, for the 400 or more rural hospitals that are on the verge of bankruptcy and closure in this country right now, you know and I know their closing will effectively close down those communities. The ability to recruit the school teacher, the ability to retain those young people or to talk them into coming back to that community when there's no health care there anymore, that'll consign them to a lack of vitality and ultimately an inability to sustain a population there. So investing as a part of this plan in rural health care specifically, the reimbursement rates that make it affordable to be a nurse practitioner or a doctor in that community, essential if we're going to solve this problem. And lastly, to anyone who thinks it's expensive to make this commitment to universal health care, it may be, but it is a heck of a lot less expensive than the way that we pay for care today in the emergency room, in the county jail, or not at all for people who live lives diminished or cut short far too soon. Thank you for the question. Appreciate it.
So Beto, I'd just like to remind you again that I'm from Charleston, which is about an hour and a half away from Beaufort. And one of the things that I've been paying attention to since my time as a child is the hyperdevelopment that is happening on the peninsula, especially in Charleston and throughout the Tri-County region. And so after learning about the concept of globalization, I recognize that when it comes to the concepts of economic development and expansion and environmental responsibility, we will almost always choose the former over the latter. I've seen how infrastructure has been constructed through communities of color and historic communities under the guise of eminent domain. I've seen how marshland has historically and illegally been filled in for the purposes of hyperdevelopment and commercial development, not for community redevelopment. And so my question to you is, after having observed that even the mitigation funds that are set aside for the redevelopment of communities, which is a federal law, if you build infrastructure through a historic or low-income community, you are supposed to set aside mitigation funds for the redevelopment of that specific community. And I have seen in Charleston County mitigation funds being used for the beautification and the construction of lofts that cost $2,000 a month. And so what kind of federal impositions or sanctions can we hold to better hold our local governance accountable?
Such a good question, and so much good context provided with it. First time I met Myra, we were at a roundtable like this one, and someone was telling me about workers who support tourists in Hilton Head, but drive 2 hours to get to their job that pays a little bit more, maybe, than minimum wage, and then 2 hours back home at the end of the day, unable to afford childcare, really unable to afford to hold that job given the cost to commute, both in gasoline and the wear and tear on their automobile. And then you mentioned the cost to the environment. How do we pay for what that is going to do in terms of emissions to our planet? And so you ask about what we do at the local level, what we do at the federal level to support the right kind of local leadership. Inclusionary zoning, meaning that the people who work the jobs in the wealthier parts of the state or the country can afford to live in those places, so they're not making 2-hour commute times. What if, you asked about impositions, we could also talk about incentives. What if we tied federal funding to a local municipality's willingness to have inclusionary zoning so that more people could afford to live in that community? What if we invested in infrastructure, not only to mean roads and bridges, but rail and transit? What if we followed Mayor Benjamin's lead in Columbia, South Carolina, who used a federal investment of community development block grant funds to ensure that there was affordable housing in the city center, and he made zoning and opportunities for private developers conditional on affordability as a function of income? It's no accident that he's the president of the United States Association of Mayors right now, because he's really leading nationally where there's a void in that leadership federally. So I totally agree with the premise of your question. All of these issues, the environment, commute times, infrastructure development, housing, they are all related. And we also, to the point you began with, which is so important, we also have to make sure that progress or economic development does not come at the expense of communities, whether that is gentrification, pushing people out whose families have lived there for generations, or forever ruining or spoiling the very land that has drawn people to that place in the first place. Under our administration, I will make sure that our EPA rigorously enforces the laws and the rules that they have. We'll use our rulemaking authority to create new ones, working with local stakeholders to make sure that we protect the airshed, the watershed, the viewshed in these incredibly historic, important places. And then make sure that we're telling the full American story, as you were telling me today as we were paying homage at Robert Small's gravesite. These really important places should be preserved, and then that story should be told to the rest of the country without compromising local communities. So thank you, Vanity. Great question. Appreciate it. Sir.
Appreciate the opportunity to be here, and thank you for coming. My name is York Glover. I'm a council member here in Beaufort County. I have many questions to ask you, but I am probably trying to view the bigger picture right now in America, because as America is not whole and well, minorities, particularly of color, really feel the pinch. And so I think that's where we are. I know that's where we are. So my question really, I like all of the candidates that are running for the Democratic Party ticket. I think any one of you would do well. My problem, my concern right now is really the rest of the offices that's out there. Senators, House of Representatives, is crucial, because having one office is not good enough. We need to have them all. So I really want candidates to really consider the whole entire picture. One of the problems we're having right now is that Senator McConnell is stacking the Supreme Court right now in the court system with judges. We just recently, a gentleman just wrote a book called In Darkest South Carolina, where he talked about Judge Waring. And one man would made a difference in bringing about the Brown versus Board of Education law to pass. That was done in 1954. He did it before then, but the Supreme Court dealt with it in 1954. That replaces 1896, where Plessy versus Ferguson was. So a Supreme Court justice, one person can make a difference in the lives of people. And I'm afraid of this country right now, because we are at a point where we are in trouble. Civility is not there. What can we do to make sure that if 22 of you do not get that one slot, that you will fill those other key positions that we need?
Yeah.
And I'm not putting you on the spot, but maybe if you got it, you make sure you tell the others that you need to run for the Senate and the House of Representatives, because we need good representation in Washington.
Councilmember Glover, thank you. Agree with everything that you said, including that any one of us running for the nomination would be a better president than the current occupant of the White House. So we've got an extraordinary field. We just need to get behind whoever that nominee is and make her or him successful in November of 2020, successful in January of 2021. You have my commitment to that. I was earlier today in Washington, D.C., and I had the opportunity to sit down and listen to Lee Saunders, who is the president of AFSCME, Public Sector Union. And we were talking about the Supreme Court, and we were talking about the Janus decision that makes it harder for public sector unions to organize, and not just to deliver for their members, but to deliver for all of us who receive public services in this country, all 320 million of us. And he said this is going to be counterintuitive, Beto, but after Janus, which made it harder for us to organize, our membership actually went up. In the Trump administration, during this attack on organized labor, you're seeing an urgency that was not there before the Trump administration. And we talked about whether the fact that all of this is on the line right now and under attack unlike any other time in our lives has finally awoken this country, commanded our attention, shocked our conscience, and is forcing us to act. So a president who says that we should ban all Muslims from coming to this country, or calls Mexican immigrants rapists and criminals, or dishonors the service of transgender Americans and all those who serve this country and put their lives on the line through a transgender troop ban, or who attacks the rights of a woman to make her own decisions about her own body. Right now, if we do not stand up for every single one of these rights and freedoms, I think we understand we're going to lose them forever. So perhaps there is some hidden gift in the Trump administration that has provoked this country to act. And we're seeing it everywhere. We see it here in South Carolina. We see it in Texas, every state that I have visited so far. But you are absolutely right. There is no person, no matter how great or resourceful or experienced, who as President of the United States could do this on their own. It's really going to take a movement. It's going to take a country. It's going to take council members here, members of Congress, U.S. senators, to make sure that we have a Supreme Court that respects the rights of the working person, the rights of a woman to make her own decisions about her own body, respects people over corporations, and doesn't say that corporations can spend unlimited amounts of money to purchase the outcomes of our elections and our legislation. And we're going to need allies in both of those chambers. And so insufficient just to run for the presidency, we've got to run for and with everyone across the country. In state houses, which are going to decide the district boundaries following 2020, in U.S. House and U.S. Senate seats, and then making sure that on the Supreme Court and every single federal bench, we have justices who reflect and look like the diversity and the genius of this country. I think it is only there and then that we meet the challenge that you just laid out. So let's make the most of this moment because we will not get it back. And that's, I think, what has brought us all to this table today. Thank you for asking the question. Appreciate it.
Michael, we've been instructed to have one more question for this. Yeah.
How you doing again? Good. My question, you said about the full American story, and we're living in a season where a lot of people are concerned about the division that we have. But my pertinent question is, what do you think about reparations? Because that's, I will tell you, that's a topic of discussion that will galvanize and invigorate younger people. And it's not a racial thing making white against black, but it's showing that the full American story needs to include some of the atrocities as well as what history has done. So I'm just curious about your feelings about that.
The answer is yes. We must repair this country from its very founding, kidnapping people from West Africa, bringing them here in bondage to literally build the wealth of the United States and to establish what has become the most powerful country on the face of the planet. In a country which must reckon with the fact that the descendants of those who built this wealth and this opportunity in the first place have not in any meaningful way been able to share in the fruits of the labor that was provided. 10 times the wealth in white America than there is in black America today. A gross disparity in criminal justice where we imprison more people than any country on the face of the planet, and they are disproportionately comprised of people of color, our jails and our prisons today. In public education, the access is not equal. And 1954, Brown versus Board of Education, here we are in 2019, and segregation in our public schools is as bad as it has ever been in this country. Healthcare outcomes, we know that we have a crisis in infant mortality and maternal mortality. In infant mortality, the discrepancy between white America and black America is greater this year than it was in 1850. In maternal mortality, 3 times as deadly to be an African American woman in this country today. So the case is made, but it will require, as you just said, telling the full story of this country. I'm at the beginning of a book that my wife lent me that she said changed her life. It's Just Mercy by Brian Stevenson. And on her advice and the advice of others, I reached out to Mr. Stevenson to get his thoughts on this question. Given his work on criminal justice issues, on freeing those who've been wrongfully imprisoned and placed on death row for crimes they did not commit, and who was instrumental in the establishment to a memorial to peace and justice in Montgomery, Alabama. And he used that word, story. He said, until we tell and every single American learns the full story of this country, we will never be able to get to repair or to reparations or to stop visiting this injustice on future generations. I could not help but notice in the rendering for the memorial to Harriet Tubman, you have this beautiful sculpture, and the 5 people represented looking at that sculpture are all white Americans. I think 4 of the 5 are children. And we think about other atrocities and disasters that other countries have endured. You think about Germany post-World War II. Everyday Germans were forced to go to those concentration camps and see what was done in their names so that they could not deny it. In South Africa, you had truth and reconciliation after apartheid. After the genocide in Rwanda, both Hutus and Tutsis were made to know and be able to share the full story of what had just happened in this country. Today, we know this. White America does not know this story. It took Queen Quet telling me about Harriet Tubman leading Americans into battle for me to fully appreciate that story. That is something that I should have learned in my textbook in 3rd grade at Mesita Elementary in El Paso, Texas. So the answer is yes. The path there, though, has to come through telling, learning, and sharing this American story with everyone. Then I think we define what reparations look like and how we begin to make that repair. So thank you for asking the question. Very grateful.
John Glover.
Perry will be your last question after this. Yeah.
John Glover, St. Helena. I'm a veteran of Vietnam. And for what this country are doing to veterans of Vietnam is atrocious. I have been exposed to Agent Orange. I served in Thailand. I didn't know there were Agent Orange there when I went there. None of my fellow brothers knew anything about it. We came back, we started having these illness. We put in for our benefit, and we are told no, we are denied it. This country, and I noticed that there are people now, there are groups that are now soliciting money for the veterans. I mean, damn it, excuse me, I'm in church, but anyway, it bothers me to see that we go out to war, you send us to war, you bring us back, you teach us how to kill, that's one thing. You bring us back, right, and then you throw us out in the streets. And when we apply for benefit, you deny us the benefits, okay? I think that, and then now people are going around soliciting money for us. And I says, hey, this government send us there. They're the one that send us into harm's way. They're the one that should be supporting us, not we happen to go out and have organization to take care of us. That's not right. So, as president, I'm a victim of Agent Orange, okay? And I have been applying for the benefits now for the last 9 years. And every time I applied, they denied me. And they told me that, they said, oh, you was on the base. Yeah, they had Agent Orange there, but you weren't on the perimeter. You was on the base, but you weren't on the perimeter. And my thing is, damn it, I was on the base.
John, first thing is, as soon as we finish, Cynthia Cano, who's sitting behind you, is going to get your contact information. We're going to work your case right now. I spent 6 years on the House Veterans Affairs Committee. I'd like to think we learned how to advocate for veterans through a bureaucracy that very often denied until veterans died. Those who served 50 years ago, there's this, I never thought about it this way, but someone said, there's this name that we've applied to the World War II generation, the greatest generation. Survived the Great Depression, went off to fight Nazi Germany, came back and helped to build the greatest economy the world has ever known. But I think there's a real case to be made for the Vietnam era generation who went to a war that this country did not fully understand, nor did this country support, returned to this country, not to ticker tape parades or applause or cheers or even help at the VA, and then quietly got back to work to continue to build this country and distinguish us as the greatest place on the planet. And now, at a time that 20 veterans a day, every single day, die by their own hand, and the greatest cohort among them are the Vietnam era veterans who have been carrying post-traumatic stress disorder or exposure to Agent Orange with them for 4 or 5 decades. Denied care that whole time, in so many cases, unable to take it anymore. Beyond working your individual case, we need to make sure that we fund the VA, commensurate with the need, based on the wars that we have started and sent women and men from this country to, going all the way back to World War II and all the way through the wars that we're fighting here tonight. And I have found no more eloquent or powerful speaker against going into any more wars or for bringing those service members back home than those who served in Vietnam, because only you know the true toll and cost of service and sacrifice to this country. So tonight, there are 44,000 funded but unfilled positions in the VA, clinical positions, which means that there are lines that wait not minutes or hours, but weeks and years in some cases to get in and see a doctor for the condition that you incurred in service to this country. I will make funding the VA a priority. I will make sure that those who have claims based on what they were exposed to, whether it was Agent Orange or the toxins in the Gulf that led to Gulf War syndrome, that they are first in line to get the care that they need, and that we spare no expense, and that we bear every burden to make sure that we deliver for those who put their lives on the line for this country. So, John, you have my commitment. Cynthia's going to get your contact information. We're going to deliver for you and every veteran. Thank you.
This is the last question, Ms. Shirley Perry. This is the last question.
Welcome to the Low Country.
Thank you.
I'm Shirley Brown Perry. I live in a small town named Dale in the Sheldon Township, and I'm very interested in getting out the vote. But I'm also concerned about voter suppression.
Yes.
What are we going to do to get people the right to vote that's guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution? Gerrymandering, we need to solve this issue now. Why would you want to keep minorities from voting? Mm-hmm. It is a constitutional right, and we must deal with it.
Thank you. Reverend Hodges was talking about Robert Smalls at the outset of this meeting. Here is a Civil War hero, an American patriot, a combat veteran, who also came back and extended that public service in the State House, in the State Senate, in the United States Congress. But there's a reason that he was one of the last African Americans to serve in the Congress for decades following. And there's a reason that the Voting Rights Act was necessary, signed into law by Lyndon Baines Johnson, but forced into law by people who were willing to risk, and in some cases lost their lives in the civil rights struggle in order to form the popular will in order to achieve that victory. And there's a reason that we need a new Voting Rights Act right now. My home state of Texas ranked 50th in voter turnout going into the 2018 election because it was drawn that way. The courts literally found in 2017 that African Americans, Mexican Americans, people based on their race or country of national origin were drawn out of a congressional district to diminish the power of their vote or the likelihood that their voice would ever be heard. I just had the chance last week to sit down with Stacey Abrams. She is the rightful governor of the state of Georgia, but hundreds of thousands of people were purged from the voter rolls by the same Secretary of State who ran against her and got to referee the rules of the election in which he prevailed. If you do not have a Voting Rights Act, you will continue to see this kind of gross injustice on this and every generation that follows. So in Georgia, in part inspired by Stacey Abrams, what we've seen in Texas, what we're hearing about today in South Carolina, we introduced a new set of democracy reforms and proposals. The first calls for bringing many more people into our democracy, so through automatic and same-day voter registration and pre-registering high school students, 16 and 17 years old, so that they're ready to vote when they're 18. We bring 55 million more Americans into our democracy through registration. We then pass and sign a new Voting Rights Act that ends the voter roll purges, ends racist gerrymandering, ends racist voter ID laws, where in Texas you can use your license to carry a firearm to prove who you are, but you cannot use your student ID from the University of Texas at El Paso to prove who you are. Election Day becomes a national holiday, and then we restore confidence in our elections and in our democracy by having paper receipts or paper ballots for every vote cast, audits of the elections that are held in this country, not only an end to gerrymandering, but an end to political action committees contributing to federal elections so that our office holders are listening not to corporations, but to people, and then making sure that the census counts every single American, no citizenship question on that census. If we do all of that, I think we meet the challenge that you just laid before us and ensure that this democracy is really up to every single task before us right now. So thank you for sharing this, and I want to make sure that we get a chance to see you in Sheldon Township and have a chance to meet our fellow Americans and the voters who will decide this next election. Thank you. Thanks, Shirley.
Thank you. We realize that all of you have questions that you could raise, but due to the time factor, we could not entertain all. But we certainly want to thank you, Beto, for coming and sharing with us. Our isolation along the coastline really contributed to our success and our survival because we were independent people. But we want you, and we need all the other candidates to realize that to isolate us now contributes to our detriment. So it is so important for our candidates who are seeking any office, but definitely national office, to reach out to this community, and you've done it today, and we thank you for that.